Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. With me today is Peter Anderson, Chief Supply Chain Officer of WestRock. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks, Angel. It's great to be here with you today.
So let's dig right in. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this role. And also tell us a little bit about WestRock. One of the more consequential companies in the supply chain space that maybe a lot of people don't know enough about.
My background is I've been in supply chain all my life. So I'm one of those weird individuals that actually started out with a supply chain degree many, many years ago. And so spent 20 years in consulting, working on supply chain transformation and digital supply chains. So really connecting all of the dots with this. And then back in 2017, moved back into industry, spent 4.5 years with a company as Chief Supply Chain Officer. And then a year and a half ago, moved to WestRock as their Chief Supply Chain Officer. WestRock's a bit of an enigma for many people. It really, truly is the only integrated paper and packaging company. I feel honored in terms of the role that I have, in that I have everything under our control and supply chain, from fiber supply, that's everything coming either recycled materials or wood from forests, right the way through to delivery to customers, and then recycling plants and bringing it back into the network again. So WestRock really, truly does have a circular supply chain, and we try and practice what we preach every day.
Indeed, and with a huge impact on downstream to all your clients as well in their efforts to be more sustainable. So let's take a step back for a minute and talk a little about how WestRock is approaching the aspiration of sustainability, of doing good by the world, and specifically around how digital efforts can help accelerate that ambition, that accomplishment of that ambition. So take us to the top of the strategy.
So top of the strategy, as you know, paper and packaging is very sustainable, obviously from a recycling perspective. So at the highest level, we're making products that we can actually recycle multiple times and bring back in. And underpinning all of that is obviously our Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 targets. And for us, from a base in 2019 to 2030, as a leadership team, we've set that as a 27.5% SBTI. We are very much driving towards that. But the one thing I've got to say is that we can't achieve this alone. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about it. It really is a collaboration with our customers around the products we make, the tools we actually provide to our customers to actually help them reduce emissions as well as how we actually interact and move everything within the supply chain. And then the digitization around that and pulling all the information together.
One of the questions that a lot of our audience thinks about is how to govern this effort. There's a lot of complexity in it. It starts with product development, and there's the questions of culture and employees. So tell us about how WestRock govern, prioritize, fund initiatives, and so on.
So it really is a team effort internally. WestRock has come together through a number of different acquisitions. There's probably over the last 7 or 8 acquisitions in terms of putting things together. So all those different companies did things in very different ways. So we've pulled those together. We've created a number of new roles in the organization and made them distinct and different. So we have a commercial role that now looks very much at NPD and thinking about how we can do things very differently in the environment. That role works very closely with the business units. We have the sustainability role that is now part of the overall strategy of the company. So strategy and sustainability are absolutely linked together. And then supply chain is the third leg of the stool in terms of then how do we execute on some of that? How do we actually minimize the impact to the environment as we go through? So the governance is not necessarily just with supply chain. It actually truly is a discussion amongst the 3 different groups about how we facilitate that for the organization.
It starts at the top. It has to link to strategy. It then has to link to specific goals that are measurable over a period of time, not just an aspiration out to 2030 or 2050. What are your biggest barriers today to making progress up that aspirational plan?
So I think the biggest challenge is more about how we can find the time and convince our partners that actually working together is better than trying to approach this singularly.
The whole idea of collaboration with clients, with suppliers is critical here, right? Give us an example of something that really excited you, so the quality of the project, the collaboration, and the outcomes.
I'm maybe look at it from 2 perspectives. One that's obviously around how we can help customers. We actually make products that have box on demand, that actually size it, look at the size of what's going inside it, and make the box and pack it online for you.
Right.
those things are how are we fixing it from a pure product perspective. But then from a customer side, we're sharing transportation routes. We're actually picking up each other's product. We're actually doing things together to minimize that empty running and reduce overall waste to the environment. Our overall truck miles that we run, we've been reducing because we've been able to do things with our customers around that as well. So it truly is becoming a collaborative exercise. The next hurdle in this is how we start getting much more integrated, and we'll need digital to do that. So, I mean, we're just embarking on some experiments at the moment with some of our suppliers around. We've all been sharing data for a long time. We get a manufacturing plan from a customer that comes down and gives us a week's worth of data, tells us what they're going to produce that week. And how many of us who've been in the industry for a long time would turn around and say, yeah, it's great, but you know you're going to get a call 3 days into it and say you've made the wrong stuff. Well, we're actually at the point now where we share live production manufacturing plans so that we can see when things are going to go wrong, so that we can actually align completely. So much closer and much truer vertical integration than we've probably ever had before.
So let's double click on digital a bit more for the next couple of minutes. The hypothesis is that to decarbonize, we have to digitize. What digital priorities are you setting? What's exciting to you in terms of digital tools? There's a cornucopia of software opportunities, software tools that are opportunities right now, particularly in the ESG space.
Wow. I mean, that was a big reason I actually went to WestRock. We have embarked upon a full ERP and all ancillary systems transformation as we speak. We are 8 months into that now. So we're getting to do something that not many people do. A lot of the people I talk to have implemented SAP or Oracle or whatever a number of years ago, and they've had best of breed and they've been bolting bits together and now having to rethink some of the strategies to be able to get to that data. We're really lucky in that we didn't really have a lot of systems. And we're now jumping from like sort of ground zero to be able to jump to something that's much further up and miss some of these intermediary steps.
Right.
So
less technical debt to worry about. You're very lucky indeed.
Super lucky. It also means that we're actually, as we're configuring for the new ERP system, as we're configuring for some of the best of breed systems, we're actually being able to architect the data and the governance of data differently, so that we don't have some of the challenges that other people have, because maybe they didn't have all of the data in a specific way that they needed on day one, where we have the opportunity to actually define that. And we have a whole data governance and strategy piece as part of our underlying projects to say, what do we need today? But more importantly, what do we think we'll need tomorrow, so we can capture it at the right level of granularity to allow us to actually do all of those what if questions in the future.
You know, you've touched on a topic that almost everyone is worried about: master data management, data accuracy, data transparency, data repositories, and then looking at the future. What am I going to need, and influencing your IT system selection as a result of that future vision. So let's take one more step down the complexity curve and talk about scope 3, the accuracy of the data, the changing nature of the data, simply because you're downstream in the supply chain. And then applying your goals and objectives to those scope 3 reductions is tricky. It's a hard thing. Plus, the regulators are obviously examining the rules, and whether it's the SEC in the US or other oversight organizations around the world. How are you approaching it?
There is no standardization. People are trying to capture things in different ways and approach it in their own unique way, because of what they have in terms of data already. I think very much about energy, because for me, energy is a huge part of my purchase. So we take it as broad as possible. And really, it's having the conversation to see what people are doing. We're then looking at that and linking it back to the data governance strategy and saying, can we, in the near term, expect everybody to give us everything the same? And I think the answer is probably not. In the future, are we going to be able to come up with a different way so that we can actually look at everything and get it exactly the same way? And so that's where the data strategy comes into it, is saying, can we actually try and have a data strategy that's built into it that will allow us to do something in a singular way in the future versus where we are today?
Well, that's the challenge. To scale, you have to standardize.
Absolutely.
But in this particular application of that notion, you have to have transparency in order to affect outcomes. Good point.
Because if you think about how many suppliers many companies have, it starts to get very difficult quickly. I mean, my prior company, we used to talk about it. I thought it was terrible. Tier 1 suppliers, 25,000. Tier 2 suppliers, 120,000.
Sure.
Tier 3 suppliers, 824,000. Right. It's an exponential problem, unfortunately.
So connecting two dots, do you need different digital tool sets to address the scope 3?
I think absolutely we need different tool sets to what we have today. They have to be digital. And we actually have to start thinking much more about how we connect them with our suppliers and our customers so that it becomes transparent, so that people can actually see that data. You wouldn't be able to do all of this manually and report it in such a way that is meaningful. We obviously asked some of our suppliers around it, and is it a real exercise or is it a tick box exercise? That, I think, is the big challenge for all of us going forward. Getting it so that you're actually getting real data and not having to spend too much time going through the audit process.
Looking at everything you said, strategy setting, goal setting, governance, digital, circularity, managing the end-to-end supply chain as you do, what are the implications on your talent? Are you training people as you then map out the future for your team and your company?
I think talent is going to be the one big issue we all face throughout the supply chain going forward. How we're looking at it very much is trying to educate and bring the capabilities of our teams to a different place. Because as everybody knows, you can't just go out and completely change everything overnight. Wouldn't be the right thing from a culture perspective, wouldn't be the right thing for the company either. So we're doing a lot of work with certain universities and programs in terms of not just to develop relationships with them for students to come to us, but actually putting our own teams back into the academic environment as well and starting to teach them some of the more advanced supply chain techniques. I'll give a plug for the University of Tennessee here. We're doing some wonderful things with them in terms of they have advanced supply chain courses in very specific topics where our teams actually go and engage. We get to work with other companies as well, which expands the breadth of what they're learning. We have some of our team actually doing executive MBAs in supply chain there, masters in supply chain in specific areas. That's just one example of how we're trying to develop the capabilities for the future. We've got to get people excited about it because if you've been in an organization where your tool of choice for planning, for instance, is a spreadsheet.
Not very exciting.
Actually a lot of people really like it because they can actually control it. They can see what the inputs are, they can see what the outputs are. So it really surprised me. I thought the first time I went to somebody and said, we're going to give you a great new planning tool, it's going to do everything for you. The look of horror is amazing. And the thing is, we've got to take them on that journey to show that it's actually going to give them more time to think about those more strategic activities, think about what we can do differently rather than focusing on the firefighting.
Right.
So talent development and taking people on that change journey is absolutely crucial to not just our success at WestRock, but any supply chain and chief supply chain officer's future. I said it a few years ago, and I still stand by it, and I'll probably get into trouble for saying it this time, is that I'm not even sure we'll have chief supply chain officers in the future. We may have chief digital officers, because I think the role that all of us have as well is changing. And as chief supply chain officers, we have a duty to do things very, very differently in the future.
And you very well may be right. There's so much to be accomplished when you think about the value chain of a business, not just the supply chain of a business, all of which is influenced by digital transformation. How are you doing in the boardroom? Supply chain officers are being featured in the boardroom more. For many, this is a first chance to do that in their careers. What's been your experience so far?
I think the role of supply chain has fundamentally changed from a visibility perspective, and it's the chief supply chain officer's moment. If we can't influence and make changes to what we want as a future, be it either in infrastructure, be it in capital, be it in footprint, be it in how we develop capabilities, then we actually shouldn't be in our roles, because it's more important than ever. And I think boards recognize that.
I resonate with that 100%. As a board member of several public companies, spending a lot of time with the chief supply chain officers of those companies, I couldn't agree more. And it's about influence, it's about communication skills, it's about presence, about strategy, and being able to be at the level of a CFO, at the level of every other member of the senior leadership team when it comes to addressing the board. So for my final question, if I give you a magic wand and you were able to wave it over a certain obstacle, a certain set of challenges, what would you use it on to help you accelerate and help your probabilities of really making your goals this year?
I think my magic wand would be, how can we get specific industry groups together? So let's pick CPG, for instance. How could we pick like sort of the chief supply chain officers in CPG and sit them down with different suppliers, different groups? Maybe it's the paper and packaging industry, maybe it's WestRock, and actually work out between us, how are we going to solve the problem? And do it collaboratively together to solve the issues of the industry rather than approaching each one separately as we go through that. To me, that would be the magic wand moment, because it would show a level of trust. In some ways, it goes back to, and I hate to say it, Angel, because it dates us. You remember CPFR back in the early 2000s?
Oh, sure.
I always thought CPFR was this wonderful idea, but it never succeeded because we didn't trust each other.
That's right.
How do we get each other together and develop that trust and maintain it? Do what's good for everybody rather than it becoming selfish rather than selfless.
Which then goes back to organizational culture, people, and leadership, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, Peter, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for that, Angel. It's been great talking to you this morning.
This episode of Radical Reinvention was produced by Brian Egan, Catherine Perry, Mike Silverman, Ursuline Khan, Duda Rodriguez, and Nick Heineman. Takasugi-Czernowin composed our theme music. To find out more about 0100 and to check out our content library, go to 0100.com. If you're interested in joining our community of contributors, send us a note at hello@0100.com.